Hello, and welcome to the Focus Series of podcast channel by AUA Media Lab. I'm Adelaida Baghdasaryan, the chair of the AUA LL.M program, an AI enthusiast and professional counsel for a number of AI-driven tech companies in Armenia and beyond. And I will be hosting this podcast dedicated to the discussion of a number of emerging AI and law, ethics, regulation questions that are around us. So, and this podcast is very special for me because I have the pleasure of speaking to a person whom I have had privilege of knowing for the last several years. And this person is Miss Anna Hovsepyan. Hello, Anna. Welcome to AUA Media Lab. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Hi, Adelaida. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Anna. Anna is a Ph.D. candidate, and her Ph.D. has been dedicated to issues of AI, more specifically deepfakes, and we will specifically cover that part. And of course, in her research, she largely speaks about the impact of AI and deepfakes on rule of law, democracy, and digital justice overall. Hence, we will be speaking with Anna about a number of emerging issues and regulation related to AI. Me and Anna, we've had a number of occasions to discuss a lot about AI regulation, and just recently we also had the privilege of speaking during the WCIT in Yerevan on different panels, but most of the time on the same question of AI regulation. So today we will continue that conversation with Anna. And since your research for the last several years, you've been engaged in AI and law-related questions, I was wondering what has sparked your interest. So I would love to start probably this conversation with this question.
Thank you so much for the question. Well, that's a very, I would say probably a very personal question to answer. I think maybe I would split it into two stages, my interest in AI. I was never, when I was growing up, I was never one of those kids that was obsessed with science fiction, or either watching or reading. But I think it was more like in my early 20s when I came across a book called The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil. And of course, I was very new to the topic, and I just got fascinated by the idea of transhumanism, which appealed me a lot. And then I somehow started watching and reading lots of science fiction, Star Trek, Space Odyssey. I had the privilege, actually, for my LLM dissertation, I had the privilege of doing a little bit of research at Kubrick's archives. That's what initially sparked my interest in AI. And at some point, I even thought maybe I will switch from law and humanities, and I wanted to do neuroscience and go more into hard sciences. But then I think it was that humanities background, and maybe even the reason why I decided at some point to become a lawyer, which was I was always very caring about injustices that I was seeing around me. And I think when I was about to make a decision if I should change my field or stay in law, I just realized that while it's so appealing, it feels like there might be a few things that are very scary about it. And it's important to say that this is early 20s. I had zero idea about what bias meant, about predictive policing and all those things. And then I started reading a bit more on surveillance capitalism, black boxes, and it just scared me a little bit over how it's going to impact more long-term the very fabric of democracies worldwide. And I'm of course, obviously, very much in favor of democratic societies. So that's basically was the main reason and how I ended up doing the research that I'm doing now.
Very interesting, Anna. So now it is now clear for me why exactly you started doing what you're doing right now. So we've been discussing a lot on legal frameworks, and definitely we need some kind of regulation, right? Because there are so many risks around us when we consider AI driven services, AI embedded products, so on and so forth, right? You just mentioned predictive policing and so on and so forth. And it is evolving very rapidly, and it usually outpaces legal and regulatory development, right? So what is the main challenge in your understanding? Why the lawmakers are so behind, and what can we do about it?
I think one of the challenges is that there are too many challenges with it. So it's incredibly difficult to say, okay, this is the challenge, and as soon as we solve the issue here, then everything is sorted, we're good to go. And interestingly enough, I think if I were to, let's say, highlight a few, maybe 4 or 5, one of the challenges is, in your question, is that the speed at which technology develops is very different with the speed usually lawmakers operate. Because I would say it's the opposite. When you are within lawmaking or policy making, it takes lots of time. It takes years. I have been working, for example, in the field of deepfakes now for studying for 5 years. The questions that we were raising 5 years ago, they are still there. And it's only, for example, this year or last year that you see some regulators saying that, okay, we need to make, for example, deepfake pornography criminal offense, etc. So I think that's one of the main issues that we are facing. And it is really difficult to understand how to solve it because it's not also only the pace, but also ideally, we need to be able to regulate something that we don't know what it will be. So how can you even do that?
That's a tough thing.
Yeah. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges. The second challenge comes with balancing how you keep the pace of innovation and how do you make sure that the regulation doesn't stifle innovation, which is a genuine concern. And I agree and disagree with it because I think that AI regulation is important. And I don't think that good regulation stifles innovation. I actually think it can do the opposite. So I think it's about that as well. Then I would say the cross-border issue is a very serious issue. You are operating in so many jurisdictions at the same time. It makes also for companies incredibly challenging to figure out how to comply with all those regulations. Enforcement is also important. And I think another thing that's very fundamental, and we have been seeing this recently in geopolitics as well in general, is that before understanding how to regulate, we also need to understand what outcome do we want from it. And this brings us to more fundamental questions about how we see societies functioning. What is more important for us? Do we want to have innovation at rapid speed and be part of the warfare? Or do we want to make sure that we are creating a secure environment for users, for example?
Yes, absolutely agree with all what you just said. And just to continue the discussion on this particular topic, so understanding what the societies want, right? What the country. So it's the politics of AI regulation. And we've seen this quite distinct divergence between European Union ideas of regulation, right? And the United States that has come with the new president, new approach. So we all know about the UAI Act that has been recently adopted, which is already in force, and it provides rather strict regulations for AI providers, deployers, users, so on and so forth. And the compliance is quite strict, required of not only the companies that are operating within European Union, but it's going to affect globally because we all know that it has extra territorial effects because the companies that are operating outside the European Union but offer services or products to EU citizens, and if these products and citizens are AI driven, that means they have to comply with this EU AI Act. And it has a special exemption for research and development, but actually I'm a little bit skeptical about this exception, and we can talk about this later. But on the other hand, we've seen the new Trump administration took over, and the new president canceled the previous president's Biden's executive order on AI, which was providing for some kind of regulation, not on the level of legislation made by Congress, but on the level of presidential decree, right? And it was requiring certain self-reporting, certain compliance, etc. So this new administration came and said, we no longer want this executive order because it stifles innovation. And this particularly also was highlighted in J.D. Vance's speech at Paris AI Summit or AI conference. So I was wondering, where are we moving in this direction? So no regulation at all, or regulation for sure? What's your opinion? How we're going to, exactly as you said, it's a big dilemma for big platforms that are offering services across the globe, and how they're going to comply with these two different approaches.
Yeah, so that's going to be, so I believe at the end we will come to regulation, but it's not going to be on the same level across jurisdiction. So I think it's going to be very tough for the EU because the EU has a more human-centric approach when it comes to AI regulation. Then you have, I would probably group it into three. Then you have more this authoritarian approach that we see in some other countries where AI is basically used as mechanism of control. And then you also have what I think is more the US approach, first of all, heavily dependent on the politics, on which, especially within the last few years, we see that politics plays an important role in it. But also you have tech companies that are incredibly powerful there. So they do have a say in it as well. They have the power. And because when we're talking about AI is not just a regular tool, right? It's an enormous it shapes power, it reshapes power in ways that we could not see. And it helps to make it much easier to concentrate power. So, of course, you see different actors. In this case, you could say bad actors also willing to say, okay, this is an incredible opportunity for us to have this power. So I think when it comes to regulation, the EU, my perception from not only the AI summit, but also from the Munich Security Council that happened, I think what the EU will do now, it probably will start changing a little bit and adapting the regulation. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be AI related. So you remember at the beginning I said there is good regulation and there is bad regulation. Now, I think in the EU, when we are looking why there is not, like, it's difficult for the EU to compete with the US, for example, when it comes to innovation. Regulation indeed stifles innovation in the EU, but it also goes regulation outside of AI. There is lots of bureaucracy within EU. There is also lots of regulation non-related to AI, which comes, for example, how labor law works there. And of course, for employers, it's not very good to operate in a jurisdiction where your employees are really well protected. While you don't have all those things in the US, right? Then you have strong strong unions. You have lack of investment. In the US, you have like Palo Alto. In the EU, you don't have that. So I think with the right approach, the EU can show that you can have regulation, good regulation, and you can have innovation as well, and it will not stifle innovation. So I guess that would be my approach.
Thank you. Very interesting. Now, I would like to speak a little bit more about your research, deepfakes. That's a fascinating part of AI. Fascinating in many senses. It could be a good thing, and it could be a very bad thing. So, and I would love for our listeners to be exactly on page with us. Just give an example of a positive deepfake possibility, maybe, and also a bad one, and how that negative effect that is possible on democracy and justice and the rule of law, which is exactly the focus of your research. So I would love to hear, and with a little bit of context for our listeners.
Well, first of all, maybe I will just explain what deepfakes are. So deepfakes, it's basically an either fully generated or manipulated audiovisual content that replicates what exists in real life. So it can be human being, it can be a location, it can be anything. But the most important thing is that there is either a little bit of manipulation. So let's say you have a photo and then you can manipulate it in a way that the person on the photo starts moving, or you can use the face of a person and completely generate a new photo, a new image or video. When it comes to good and bad, so there are clear bad uses. For example, let's say deepfake pornography. Why I'm mentioning this is that even until now, deepfake pornography is the most common use of deepfakes. Over 90% of it targets women and children. I think even over 95% of it. Then if you look at the good uses, of course, for example, some argue that it democratized more like artistic field, movie making. You can also look at uses that you can say it's good and bad at the same time. So, for example, resurrecting your loved ones. This is something that already exists. There's a few, for example, very interesting cases from China as well. Let's say you lose someone, and then you can go with all the collection of audio and video recordings that you have and try to create a digital twin of that person. Now, for someone, that might be a good thing. Connecting with the person that they lost. For someone, it's going to be definitely, some people are going to raise lots of concerns over whether it's right or wrong towards the person that uses it and towards the deceased person. So you have lots of
moral
uses.
questions, ethical questions,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I would love also to specifically hear your suggestions for measures that could be taken by maybe lawmakers or the government through regulation or maybe otherwise that would prevent these bad uses. And because in your research you also speak about how these bad uses affect democracy, affect rule of law. So what would be these measures?
So I think when it comes to deepfake solutions on how to combat malicious uses of it, let's put it that way, I think the important starting point is just the recognition that you are not going to get rid of it. It's going to be there. So all the solutions are going to help you to just create a safer information space. And here I believe that you shouldn't only think about regulation, you shouldn't only think about detection tools. So I think we need this four-angle approach. I wouldn't call it 4 stages, but like you need these 4 pillars. You need regulation and soft law approach. You need detection technology. You need provenance. and you need awareness. And if I may just expand a little bit on why I'm saying all four are important. So, for example, regulation is important because you need to send a clear message, right? So, for example, if making deepfake pornography is not a criminal offense, you are really in a bad situation, because if you, for example, find someone who created that image, distributed it, for example, in the high school. I'm saying this because that's a pretty common thing in recent years. You even go and find the person who did that. What does the law say? Is it a criminal offense or it's not a criminal offense? Now, I do like really what the UK did. It's still in the process, but the UK stand on it is that even if you create it for your own use, it is a criminal offense, even if you don't distribute it. And I think that is right. But then, okay, we have the regulation, but there are so many issues that come with deepfakes. One is known as the liar's dividend. And that basically means no matter if it's genuine or not, no matter if your detection tools are saying that it's genuine or not, the bad actor will come and say, you know what? The reality is that it's not a deepfake. But the bad actor will come and say, no, it is a deepfake. It's just that your detection tools are not good enough and they can't detect that it is a deepfake. So this takes us to the point where, so we need to figure out about the questions of provenance so that we can actually go and find the source, where the original source was from. So they are already, for example, Microsoft, Adobe, BBC, some big companies have been collaborating together on more provenance technologies. Then you also need detection, because in some cases, detection is good, but detection gets outdated very quickly. And also for detection, it just takes time, and it's not going to be very reliable for the general public. So let's say there is political content that's deepfake manipulated. And then the government comes and says that it is a deepfake. But then are people going to believe it? If there is already this a little bit what I call a paranoia over the information that nothing is true. We have lost any sense of where the true content exists or not. So. And then our experience shows that when you raise awareness, when people are aware about the existence of it, it decreases the chances of, for example, scams with deepfakes. So susceptibility towards such content decreases. So I think that is also very important, because one of the also dangerous applications, I would highlight 5 dangerous applications with deepfakes, one of which is cybersecurity threats and fraudulent activities. So we know that we already have examples of people transferring millions thinking that they were talking to their CEO, but it was not the CEO. So that's why if we just approach that we only need regulation or only provenance, it's more waste of time. It's not going to give the right outcome.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Anna. This was a very comprehensive and in-depth discussion. My next question would be about your role at IEEE. You're a board member, and I was wondering just a little bit to our listeners, what kind of an organization is that? And I would also love to hear what ethical and maybe community guidelines could the policymakers suggest to improve the situation?
So first, I was a co-chair of the committee, and I just want to make sure that everything that I will say, it's not part of the work of the committee, but maybe I can just answer the question with regard to how I see in general power concentration. But I do not represent the committee here. Sure. So I think when it comes to power concentration and what type of guidelines we need with it, I mentioned this earlier, when AI is a tool and it's an enormous concentration of power tool. And what we see nowadays happening is that we have we can basically count probably even on one hand a few people that have enormous concentration of power. And that cannot be healthy in any situation. It doesn't even matter whether the characters, whether they are good actors or bad actors. Even if they are the best actors out there that are operating in the interests of people, first of all, that type of concentration at some point will be inherited. And you don't know who will be the next person that will have so much concentration of power. The second issue is that they are not democratically elected, and their main goal is pursuing profit, because they are not non-profit organizations. So you are giving all this, whether it comes to, for example, matters of justice on online platforms, whether it comes to understanding the line over where privacy ends, over your data profiling, you're giving everything and you are not getting anything back. So I think with that regard, it's just important to have certain guidelines when we're saying, and not even guidelines. I have to say, I don't think we only need these guidelines. I think we need something more binding. We need better antitrust laws. Yeah, we need to make sure that the distribution of power is not so concentrated. There is a good distribution of power. So I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily thinking about ethical guidelines with that regard. I think we have kind of passed the stage of ethical guidelines, and we need to move towards something that's more binding.
Stricter.
Yes.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, this has been incredibly insightful conversation about AI's impact on law, ethics, and governance. Anna, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on deepfakes and your thoughts on privacy and the broader legal challenges of AI. I always enjoy the conversations with you, and I look forward to talking to you on different other things outside this Media Lab episode. But before we wrap up, I would like to ask or give you a chance to address to our listeners, maybe share a message or a piece of an advice, whether it's for policymakers or legal professionals or just everyday AI users. Please.
Well, those are very different groups, right?
I know. But you choose your favorite.
Maybe I'll choose something suitable for everyone.
Great.
I think all those three groups, they have more to say in shaping the outcome of these few years than they think, of how we will end up, whether regulating, not regulating, where the lines of regulation are. And I think it's important to just have that in mind. If you are a user, you have more to say than you think. If you complain about the way that your data is used and you don't like it, do it. If you are a lawmaker, don't just easily give up. It's stages like this when we had new technology coming, we had to regulate not only even technology, by the way, different companies, whether it was tobacco regulation or whatever. You have something to say. It just takes time. So just be active. And what I would say is just engaged in the conversation, but engage in it critically. And this is very important. I think the topic in general is a very emotional one. We are going to questions that are very fundamental. Sometimes maybe our beliefs will stop us from seeing what the potential is or what might happen that might be good. Sometimes we might even just be like, because we are in our information bubble and we just become very emotional. Just take your time and approach the questions from a more critical angle, just critically engaged in it, and take your time and just be part of the conversation. That's, I think, what I would recommend to everyone. That's
a very powerful takeaway from this conversation. Thank you, Anna, for joining us. And to our listeners, please stay engaged. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share your thoughts in the comment section. And I wish you all the best. And thank you very much again, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adelaida. It was really a pleasure to be here. I hope there will be another opportunity as well.
We'll do it.
Conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.